You do not actually want to feel nothing. You want to stop being hijacked because if you genuinely felt nothing, you would not be calm. You would be numb. And numb people do not make good decisions. They just delay consequences. What you are chasing is emotional unreactivity, the ability to feel the signal without becoming the signal, to have anger show up without your mouth turning into a weapon, to have anxiety spike without your entire day collapsing around it, to have someone disrespect you without you donating your nervous system to them for free. Quick thing before we go deeper. We are building toward our first 1,000 subscribers, and if you subscribe, you are basically voting for more videos that actually explain the mechanisms instead of repeating slogans. And if this hits a nerve, tap like, because it tells the algorithm to put this in front of the people who need it most. Now, if you have ever told yourself, I overreact, that is usually not true. Most people do not overreact. They react on time to an older situation. That is the first insight most people miss. Your reaction is often accurate. It is just misaimed. It is a perfectly calibrated defense response pointed at the wrong target because your brain is doing pattern matching, not moral reasoning. Here is what is actually happening. Your nervous system does not ask, what is the best response in this moment? It asks, what does this resemble? And resemblance is enough to trigger the full program. That is why a small comment can hit like a punch. The comment is not the threat. The category is the threat. Think about this for a second. Two people hear the exact same sentence. One shrugs. The other burns for 3 days. The sentence did not have 3 days of energy in it. The energy came from stored prediction error, old humiliation, old powerlessness, old abandonment. The present moment just provided the handle. So if you try to become unreactive by suppressing emotion, you are basically trying to silence a smoke alarm without dealing with the wiring. It will work until it does not. Then it comes back louder. What you want is to retrain the prediction machinery, and the way you do that is not through willpower, it is through precision. Let me show you the first tool. It sounds almost too simple, but it is not. It is called affect labeling, and there is research showing that putting precise words on a feeling reduces amygdala activation and increases prefrontal regulation. But most people do it wrong because they label like this: I am mad. That is not labeling, that is drowning. Try this instead. Separate sensation, emotion, and story. Sensation is raw data. Tight chest, hot face, buzzing arms, shallow breath. Emotion is the inferred category. Anger, shame, fear, disgust. Story is the interpretation. They do not respect me. I am trapped. I am going to lose status. When you mash those together, it feels like reality. When you separate them, it becomes information. And here is the weird part. Your brain calms down not because you talk yourself out of the emotion, but because you stop feeding it uncertainty. The nervous system hates ambiguity. Ambiguity is danger. Precision is safety. So in the moment, you do not say, I should not feel this. You say, my throat is tight. This is shame. The story is that I am being exposed. That single sentence creates distance. Not distance like dissociation, distance like steering. Now here is where it gets interesting. Even if you label perfectly, you will still be reactive if you have one specific habit. You treat emotions as commands. Most people think the problem is big emotion. The actual problem is obedience. Anger says, attack. Anxiety says, avoid. Shame says, hide. And if you automatically comply, your brain learns a brutal lesson. This emotion is necessary for survival because it works. That is operant conditioning inside your own mind. Emotion arises, you obey. The short-term consequence is relief or control, and the brain stamps it as correct. Next time, the emotion comes faster and stronger because you trained it. So emotional unreactivity is less like be zen and more like break the training loop. Here is the concrete move. You install a delay that you never negotiate with. Not I will calm down and then respond. That is vague. Your brain can cheat. A real delay is procedural. I do not send messages when my pulse is high. I do not make decisions in the first 10 minutes of anger. I do not explain myself while I am flooded. Flooding is a real phenomenon in relationship research, by the way. When physiological arousal passes a threshold, your ability to process complex information drops. You become fast, certain, and stupid. That is not an insult, it is biology. So you build a rule that protects you from your own temporary certainty. And notice the pattern here. The goal is not to remove emotion. The goal is to remove emotion's authority. You can feel the wave without surfing it into a wall. But if it were that easy, you would already be doing it. So let us go one layer deeper, because this is where most advice completely fails. Your reactivity is not only emotional, it is social. A huge portion of what you call emotion is actually status computation. The human brain is constantly running a background process that asks, where am I in relation to other people? Not because you are shallow, but because in ancestral environments, social rank and belonging were survival. So when someone interrupts you, corrects you, ignores you, or even just takes too long to respond, your nervous system can read it as a status drop. A tiny status drop can feel like existential threat because it maps onto an old equation. Lower status equals less protection, less access, less safety. Now watch the implication. If your reactivity is partly status defense, then no amount of breathing exercises will fix it, because you are not dealing with breath, you are dealing with rank. Here is the second tool. Stop arguing with the content and start measuring the status move. Ask yourself in real time, what status message did my brain just hear? Did my brain hear, you are incompetent? Did it hear, you are replaceable? Did it hear, you do not matter? Did it hear, you are not safe here? When you name the status message, you do two things. First, you expose the hidden driver. Second, you realize the driver is often speculative. It is a guess, not a fact. And that is critical, because the brain reacts to guesses as if they were reality, especially under stress. Let me give you an example you will recognize. Someone gives you feedback at work. You react defensively. You tell yourself it is because they are unfair. But underneath, the status message is, I am about to be seen as low value. Your defense is not about the feedback. It is about protecting a social identity. Once you see that, you can choose a different move. You can ask a clarifying question instead of launching a counterattack. You can buy time. You can turn a status threat into an information exchange. That is emotional unreactivity, not passivity, not weakness, but the ability to keep your strategy online. Now I want to hit you with a third insight, because this one changes the whole game. A lot of reactivity is not about what you feel. It is about what you predict you will feel next. This is called effective forecasting, and humans are consistently bad at it. Your brain predicts, if I do not respond right now, I will feel powerless later. Or, if I let this go, I will regret it. So you react to prevent a future emotion. You are not fighting the present. You are fighting anticipated regret. That is why you send the text. That is why you take the bait. That is why you escalate an argument when part of you is begging to stop. You are trying to avoid the feeling of not defending yourself. So the practice is not only calming down, it is expanding your tolerance for the predicted emotion. Ask, what feeling am I trying to prevent by reacting? Is it the feeling of being overlooked? the feeling of being foolish, the feeling of being weak, the feeling of being unseen, because if you can tolerate that feeling for 60 seconds, you suddenly do not need the reaction. The urge collapses. Now stay with me, because this next part recontextualizes everything. Most people think emotional control is something you do in the moment of trigger. That is backwards. Your level of reactivity in the moment is mostly determined by how much unprocessed emotion you are carrying before the moment. Your nervous system has a bandwidth. If you have been sleeping badly, overstimulated, socially vigilant, and chronically resentful, your bandwidth is already spent. Then a minor stressor shows up, and your brain treats it like the final straw, because it is. So the real question becomes, what is taking up your emotional RAM? And here is the uncomfortable answer. It is usually unfinished internal negotiations. You have promises you have not kept to yourself, boundaries you did not enforce, conversations you avoided, grief you intellectualized, anger you turned into productivity. And because it is unfinished, your brain keeps it open like 100 browser tabs. That background load makes you reactive. So emotional unreactivity is often not a calm down skill. It is a close the loops skill. One practical method is what I call the two-column closure. On one side you write, what I am pretending does not matter. On the other side you write, what it is costing me to pretend. For example, I am pretending I do not care that my friend constantly cancels. And cost, I am tense every time we make plans. I act cold. I do not trust people. Or I am pretending I'm fine with how my partner talks to me. Cost, I keep a silent score. I explode over small things. You do this not to be dramatic, but to bring hidden emotional debt into conscious negotiation. Once it is conscious, you can make an adult decision. Address it, accept it, or leave it. But you stop paying interest. Now let us synthesize this into a framework you can actually run in real life, because insight without a procedure is just entertainment. Here is the model. Reactivity is a three-part loop. Trigger, meaning, impulse. The trigger is the event. Meaning is the status message and the memory category your brain attaches to it. Impulse is the action your body wants to take to restore safety fast. To become emotionally unreactive, and you do not fight the trigger. You intercept meaning and you delay impulse. Intercept meaning by separating sensation, emotion, and story, and by naming the status message. Delay impulse with a non-negotiable rule that creates time, and by asking what future feeling you are trying to prevent. And then, outside the moment, you reduce baseline load by closing the loops you keep carrying. If you do those four things, you are doing something very few people do. You are teaching your nervous system a new lesson. Feelings are data, not directives. One more detail that matters. People think being unreactive means being slow. Not true. It means being accurate. An emotionally reactive person is fast but inaccurate. An emotionally unreactive person can be fast when clarity is high and slow when clarity is low. That is wisdom as a timing skill. So the next time you feel that familiar heat rise, do not ask, how do I make this go away? Ask, what category did my brain just assign? What status message did it just hear? What impulse is it trying to force? And what am I afraid I will feel later if I do not act now? If you can answer those four questions, even badly, you are no longer a puppet. You are a scientist inside your own mind. And here is the loop closure from the beginning. You do not want to feel nothing. You want to stop being hijacked by old programs running on new situations. If this changed how you see your own reactions, tell me in the comments what emotion tends to take over you the fastest, and what status message sits underneath it. Because once you can name the message, you can finally decide whether you still believe it. The person who controls you most is not the person who triggers you. It is the part of you that thinks reacting is the only way to stay safe.